Hey everyone, I'm your host, Leah, and I will be steering you through this episode of Hasty History. As you may know, Hasty History episodes are bonus episodes that are no-nonsense crash courses in history and are very brief overviews of some of our favorite topics. So, no cocktail segment, no ads, and no bloopers. And since we're aiming for no nonsense, I'm going to dig right into today's episode. As you may have guessed from the title, we will be diving into the extravagant life and the mysterious death of Bavaria's supposedly Mad King, Ludwig II. Ludwig II, aka Ludwig Otto Friedrich Wilhelm, was King of Bavaria from 1864 until his death in 1886. He is often referred to as the Swan King or the Fairy Tale King, and you will find out why in just a little bit. Ludwig became King of Bavaria when he was only 18 years old, and after a couple years of running the country, waging multiple short-lived wars on his neighbors, Ludwig started to withdraw from his day-to-day duties. And despite his lack of interest in his people, he was quite popular with his constituents, mostly due to his ravishing good looks. You see, Ludwig wasn't your typical prince. He was very sensitive, very imaginative, and often described as broodingly handsome. He grew up spending his summers in a legitimate fantasy castle called Hohenschwangau, roughly translated to High Castle of the Swan, hence one of his nicknames, the Swan King. I've been to this castle, and you guys, it is crazy. Ludwig's father had rebuilt the castle from medieval ruins, and he went all out on this fantastical nod to medieval times. Not the restaurant, guys. There were extravagant wall paintings depicting popular medieval stories and fairy tales. The castle itself was constructed in an overly romanticized medieval fashion, and so on. So you could see why young Ludwig may have been more interested in fantasy than reality. He was surrounded by it growing up. His cousin and friend, Empress Elizabeth, stated, "The king was not mad. He was just an eccentric living in a world of dreams." All right, skipping back forward to Ludwig's early reign, he really focused on bringing art, poetry, and theater to his court. One of his first acts as king was to summon composer and theater director Richard Wagner, whose music you are listening to right now, and who many believe he was actually romantically obsessed with throughout his life, but we'll get to that. He also laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the court theater at Gartnerplatz, the Bavarian capital castle in Munich. Ludwig hated public events and large crowds, so he eventually grew more and more secluded, and instead focused on his own personal architectural and artistic endeavors. He commissioned the construction of 2 new lavish palaces and the infamous Neuschwanstein Castle. For those of you who don't know about Neuschwanstein, it is the castle that Disney's Cinderella Castle was based off of, and Ludwig built it just a stone's throw away from his childhood summer home, Hohenschwangau. Like Hohenschwangau, Neuschwanstein was an exaggerated, romanticized take on medieval castles. I highly encourage you to check out some pictures of it, and perhaps I'll post a few of my personal ones to our Instagram because it is truly breathtaking. Anyways, Ludwig spent all of his royal revenues on these artistic projects and even ended up borrowing extensively, mostly from family, to continue his work. While it is believed that he did not spend any state money on his personal artistic ventures, his extravagant expenditures brought him scrutiny from his advisors and would eventually be used against him. But before we get to that, I wanted to quickly discuss Ludwig's sexuality. Remember 5 minutes ago when I just breezed past his romantic obsessions with Wagner? Well, here's the scoop. Ludwig was engaged during his early reign to his cousin, Duchess Sophie Charlotte. Under the pressure to produce an heir, and as Ludwig put it, the main substance of our relationship has always been Richard Wagner's remarkable and deeply moving destiny. So, in short, guys, him and his fiancée bonded over their mutual obsession with this guy. The wedding was, unsurprisingly, continuously postponed and eventually called off altogether, and Ludwig never married nor had any known mistresses. Why is this? Well, now we know Ludwig struggled with his sexuality. Ludwig's diary, private letters, and other documents outlined his internal conflict with his homosexual desires, which went against his Catholic upbringing and the expectations of his people. By 1885, the king was 14 million marks in debt. And that's not in today's money, guys. That's like back then. He had borrowed heavily from his family, and rather than economizing as his financial ministers advised him, he planned further opulent designs without hesitation. He demanded that loans be sought from all of Europe's royalty, remaining aloof from matters of state, and he refused to marry and produce an heir to the throne. Feeling harassed and irritated by his ministers, he considered dismissing the entire cabinet and replacing them. So, the cabinet decided to act first. Seeking a cause to depose Ludwig by constitutional means, the rebelling ministers decided on the rationale that he was mentally ill and therefore unfit to rule. After compiling enough quote-unquote proof of his insanity via statements from 4 psychiatrists, none of which had ever actually met Ludwig, let alone examined him, a government commission went to Neuschwanstein to depose Ludwig and place him under arrest. On June 10, 1886, some faithful servants tipped the king off to the plan, so for 2 days he locked himself in Neuschwanstein. During this time, he managed to overtake the commission with the aid of his personal guards, but eventually, for some reason, he let them go again. He also managed to sneak out several letters and public statements asking for aid, all of which were stopped in one way or another. Ludwig was eventually detained in the early hours of June 12, 1886, while attempting to escape, and he was transported to Berg Castle on the shores of Lake Starnberg, just south of Munich. So I know what you're thinking at this point. When is he going to die, and why was it so mysterious? Well, the day after his detainment, June 13th, after a morning walk around the grounds of Berg Castle with one of those aforementioned psychiatrists, Dr. Bernhard von Guden, and 2 servants, Ludwig was thought to be in good spirits. Later that evening, around 6:30 p.m., he asked von Guden to accompany him on another walk. Or did von Guden ask him? It's unclear. This time, they wanted to walk along the shores of Lake Starnberg. Von Guden agreed and reportedly ambiguously told the servants, "No attendant may come with us." The 2 men were due back to the castle by 8 p.m., but never returned. After searches were made for over 2 hours by the entire castle staff, the bodies of both the king and von Guden were found, floating along the shallow waters of the shore. The king's watch had stopped at 6:54 p.m., possibly estimating his time of death, just 20 minutes after he had left the castle. Ludwig's death was officially ruled a suicide by drowning, but this left many questions unanswered. For one, his official autopsy report indicated that no water was found in his lungs. He was also known to be an incredibly strong swimmer, and the area where his body was found was only about waist deep. It is also noted that Ludwig had in no way ever expressed suicidal feelings, leading up to his death and even during his deposition. Even stranger, Dr. von Guden's body showed signs of strangulation and blows to the head. To this day, speculation exists that Ludwig was murdered by his enemies while attempting to escape from Berg. German journalist Hans Nobar suggests that the king was shot and that this wound was excluded from the autopsy report. According to the king's personal fisherman, Jacob Liddy, in notes he left around his house, only found after his death, Liddy had hidden behind bushes with his boat, waiting to meet the king to row him across the lake where loyalists were waiting to help him escape. And as the king stepped up to his boat and put one foot in, a shot rang out from the banks, killing Ludwig on the spot. Further supporting this theory that Ludwig was actually shot, many years after his death, the Countess Josephine von Raab-Konitz would often show off her afternoon tea guests a gray coat with 2 bullet holes in the back, asserting it was, in fact, the one Ludwig was wearing when he died. A second theory suggests that Ludwig died of natural causes, such as a stroke brought on by the cool 53-degree Fahrenheit temperature of the lake during his attempted escape. Ludwig's remains were interred in the crypt of the Michaelskirche in Munich, but as is Bavarian tradition, his heart does not lie with the rest of his body. It instead was placed in a silver urn and sent to the Chapel of Mercy in Altauting, where it sits beside those of his father and grandfather. The king was succeeded by his younger brother Otto, but since Otto was slightly more legitimately considered incapacitated by mental illness, now thought to be schizophrenia or possibly a severe contraction of syphilis, the king's uncle, Luitpold, remained regent until his own death in 1912 at the age of 91. Today's Bavarian visitors and tourists pay tribute to King Ludwig by visiting his grave, as well as his multiple castles, palaces, and art collections. Ironically, the very castles that once caused Ludwig financial ruin have today become the most profitable tourist attractions for the Bavarian state and have paid themselves many times over. So, what do you all think? Was Ludwig murdered in an attempt to take the throne, or did he die of less sinister causes? Much like many of our topics on this podcast, we will likely never know. As Ludwig once said himself, I wish to remain an eternal enigma to myself and to others. And I'd say in that, he was a success. Thank you all so much for listening to the third installment of Hasty History. As always, we encourage you to check out some of our full-length episodes of #History, which we drop weekly. If you have suggestions for more Hasty History topics, please send them our way at #History1865@gmail.com or on our website at #History-pod.com. We want to tailor these Hasty History episodes to you and what you're interested in, so be sure to drop us a line on any topic you love or want to learn more about. And be sure, as always, to follow us on Instagram at #History_podcast, where we post lots of extras, including behind the scenes of recording, drink recipes, and so much more. Thank you all, stay safe, and we will see you next time.